Commissioned on Sexual Harassment. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm a principal lawyer at Slater & Gordon, and I'm here to give some tips on what to do if you're experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace. So I think first thing is that understandably most employees, if they are being subjected to sexual harassment by a colleague, find it quite distressing, and they don't always feel like they're in a position to speak up. But sometimes the simplest way of dealing with it is actually to do something quite simple, which is to say to the person who is responsible for the conduct that it's unwanted, it's unwelcome, and you'd like them to stop. And sometimes that is surprisingly effective. So making it clear that the conduct is unwanted. However, there may be some cases where either that doesn't work or where it wouldn't be appropriate for you to approach the individual directly if you don't think that they're going to be receptive to that, in which case you should speak to somebody else, perhaps HR, perhaps your line manager. Obviously, if it's your line manager who's responsible for harassing you, then that may not be the right person to speak to. The other thing to bear in mind is that it's important to have a paper trail or a diary of what's been going on if you do need to eventually raise a formal grievance or if you want to bring a claim. So it's important to note things down as you go along. And when I say note things down, I mean date, time, place, the words spoken, any inappropriate gestures or touching and what that involved, and indeed if there were other people present, who they were. Isolated incidents often seem trivial unless you put them in the context of a pattern of behaviour, and that's why it's so important to be able to show what the pattern has been. Thirdly, if informal action on your part isn't effective in ensuring that the harassment is dealt with or stopped, you may want to raise a formal grievance. You should look at your employer's grievance policy or its bullying and harassment policy. Some employers call it a dignity at work policy, and it'll give you details of how to do that. And you should include in that formal grievance, which is essentially a letter complaining about what has happened, details of every incident and act that you are concerned about. If your employer is not able to resolve matters through the grievance process, then you may want to bring an Employment Tribunal claim. If you're going to do that, you do need to act quickly, because most Employment Tribunal claims need to be brought within 3 months of the act complained about. So if you're complaining about an act of sexual harassment that took place last week, if you don't bring a claim within 3 months of that act, you may not be able to pursue a claim in the Employment Tribunal at all in relation to it. I think that my most important tip for everybody is that it is important to have some kind of support in place, because it can be a very difficult process, even if you're just trying to deal with it informally or you're going through a grievance process at work. So you may want to seek advice from an employment law solicitor, a trade union rep, or citizens' advice, or indeed from family or friends who can help you through the process. If it's affecting your health, I would also suggest going to see your GP. There are some particularly extreme types of sexual harassment which could give rise to claims that aren't just employment-related claims. They might be criminal offences or indeed other civil claims that you could pursue. And where you're being subjected to very extreme behaviour, it may be that you need to go to your employer and ask for the person responsible for that behaviour to be removed from the workplace while it's being investigated, or to ensure that you don't have to be come into contact with that individual.